Had the Observer, Longboat Observer paper for many years, and I'd say 20, 25 years, and they helped to form the Longboat Historical Society, and it was primarily through the work and effort of Claire and Ralph that the Longboat Key Historical Society exists. So this is an interview, and this is a test just to see how the video's working. Tom Mayers. Okay, this is almost Memorial Day weekend, and this is Ralph and Claire Hunter, and they are the co-original founders of the Longboat Key Historical Society Incorporated. So Ralph and Claire Hunter.
Thank you. First of all, the date is almost Memorial Day
26.
2006. Right.
26.
26, yeah.
2011.
Yeah. And we're going to tell about the history of Longboat Key. And actually, the Gulf was 6 feet lower in 800 AD than it is today. Therefore, there are no artifacts. They're all underwater. We found a few, but very few. The Calusa and Timucua Indians were here first, usually on vacation. Most of them were tall and athletic and tanned, and the Spanish were 5'6" or so. And the Indians were very good shape. They were over 5'6" for sure, and sun-tanned, and oh, they were great. They also were in Sarasota, of course, and they had middens or garbage heaps in Sarasota, and they had one 100 feet high north of Whitaker Bayou. I'm sorry, it was 100 feet north of Whitaker Bayou. It was 35 feet high, and in it they found Maya relics from South and Central America. And of course, to the early Sarasotans, they were perfect for roads. They were all shells, so they used all the revenue for all the middens for roads, so they disappeared. In 1538, the Spanish were in Longboat Key, and the Indians didn't like that at all. The Indians built beach fires, and DeSoto and Juananesco was here. The Indians were, and they brought smallpox, chickenpox, and they sought gold, and they had 12 ships and 600 men and fighting dogs. They were looking for gold. Well, the gold was Dahlonega, Georgia, but they didn't know that. They never found any, of course. 1719, the French and Spanish fight over Florida. Don't know who won. 1763, the Indians have been reduced to 80 families. Not many left on Longboat Key, for sure. Most of them moved to Cuba. The Seminoles stayed. The Seminoles mean wanderers, and many slaves joined the Seminole tribes. It's not really a tribe, it was an amalgam of a whole bunch of Indians who were moving south to get away from some of the other tribes, the Cherokees, for example. 1818, war with Andy Jackson. 1819, Spain ceded Florida to the United States. 1821, Jean Lafitte was here. Only Gordon Whitney said, no, that's John Lafitte. It's Leffitt. Leffit's Key is named after John Lafitte. And if you want to, Ralph, let's dig a little hole here. I think we'll find something here on Leffit's Key. Well, we never did. 1835 and 1855, the Seminoles Wars. They were fighting against the Americans who were coming down here and driving them out. And at one time, Billy Bowlegs was their chief. He had a garden near Fort Myers. And the American soldiers didn't like that garden. As a matter of fact, they loved the garden, but it was really Bowlegs, so they destroyed it. And that was what brought on the Second Seminole War. The American soldiers just completely destroyed his beautiful garden, and it was beautiful. And not much we could do about it. Incidentally, Mary Jane Wyatt lived in Manatee County, and she was a feisty gal. She weighed 80 pounds, and she married Bill Whitaker. They had 8 children. That's pretty good for Mary Jane Wyatt. Okay, 1842, the Armed Occupation Act. Everybody got 160 acres who applied. It was quickly repealed because the Senate realized that the common people would get land, and you can't have that happen, so they repealed it. 1848, a hurricane hit. It hit New Pass, and Bill Whitaker Mary woke up one day and said, "Hey, look, there's a new pass," and that's what how it got its name. 1858, March of Tears to Oklahoma. The Americans rounded up all the remaining Indians and sent them to Oklahoma via Longboat Key, and that was the end of the Seminoles. 1861, Civil War. Florida's greatest contribution was cattle to the Confederates. 1862, the Homestead Act. On Longboat Key, 22 people filed for land. It was all plotted, and if you wanted to apply for it, you had to go through a lot of red tape, same as today. But 22 people filed for land on Longboat Key, allowed them built here. At the end of the Civil War, Judah Benjamin, who was the Secretary of War in the Confederacy, right after the war, he took some money and he fled. And they never found him. Why? Because he came to Florida. And he came to that house in Manatee, what's the name of it?
Gamble Mansion.
The Gamble Mansion. And he came to the Gamble Mansion and hid out. And it was a very interesting story about him. He hid out there for a while, and then he decided he wanted to get to England. Get to England? That's exactly what he did. Some sympathizers came along, let him have a boat, and he took off from Manatee County through the inland waterway, what there was of it, and he passed right by Longboat Key for sure. He had to. Finally, he ends up way down south of Florida and on the Keys, and he finally escapes to Cuba. And once he's there, he hires a boat and gets to England. He had quite some adventures there because there was a typhoon and a few other things, but he bribed his people. He had stolen a lot of Confederate money, and so he bribed a lot of people and got to England, where, believe it or not, he resumed his legal profession and was very successful in England as a lawyer. And I think he died in England. In 1891, the Rivers and Harbors Act dredged the bay. Thomas Mann applied for and got 144 acres. As a matter of fact, the property is exactly where Claire and I are now. It was on the north end of Longboat Key, 144 acres, oh boy. Anyway, then Thomas Mann sold it eventually. I think he sold it for $500 for the 144 acres in the north end of Longboat Key. That's a pretty good buy. 1895, the mistletoe opened up the bay, and they said that was the greatest thing that ever happened to Sarasota, the Longboat Key, when they dredged the bay. And sure enough, the mistletoe, the boat you've seen, came across. 1907, the Longboat Key Post Office was established on the south end of Longboat Key, where Corey's Landing is now. And Sally Bannon was there. She was a gal from Arcadia. She and her husband.
No,
Is that right? No. Where was Sally Bannon?
She was on the north end.
Oh.
Me in the picture.
Oh yeah. She was in the north end. I forgot that. Sally Bannon's mother sold the place to the Holtz family, right?
Yep.
And the Holtz family established it. They never lived in it though. And finally Helen sold the house about 10 years ago. Helen Holtz sold it. and it's been destroyed. Jake Rupert of Yankee fame, remember Rupert's beer? Well, he bought 37 acres for $25,000. Was going to build a hotel. That didn't work out. Either it didn't work out or it burned. I can't remember. 1911, 1912, we had some newspapers. The Longboat, I forget what they call it. I think it was a Sarasota paper. But in 1921, believe it or not, Longboat Key was split in two by an act of Congress, by an act of the state legislature. Why? Because Manatee County was so big it reached all the way down to Lake Okeechobee. So in 1921, they cut up Manatee County and established about 5 other counties. One of them was Sarasota County. So the surveyors had done the whole thing, and they had lines, and so they took one line and drew it across the state where they were making new counties, and one of them crossed Longboat Key. Trouble was, north of the line was Manatee County, and south of it was Sarasota County. They didn't care, so Longboat Key was split in two, and it's been that way ever since. Sarasota County was created then, of course. Then we had a hurricane that year, and a lady by the name of Bessie Boston from Arcadia Phone Company. She and her husband here, they came to Longboat Key because they heard that the tomato farming was very, very good. So they came down here, rented a house, and did very, very well with tomatoes. Oh, they had a marvelous time. But then the storm hit, and it hit so hard that it flooded most of Longboat Key with salt water. As far as they were concerned, Bessie Boston's husband went out to see what was going on and found that the chickens in the chicken coop were floating. So he figured, wow, this must be a big one. So, and it was. Bessie heard a horn during the night, and she wondered what it was. So she went out with a big pole and her baby's diaper on the top of it and waved it, and sure enough, the horn blew again. So she didn't know what to do. It was raining so hard, she stayed in. And in the morning, she told her husband, he said, well, let's go out and look for it. So they did. They went out and looked for it, and they found it. It was a boat, and the boat was in a tree, believe it or not. And they threw him a rope, and they got him down, and the Bostons then returned to Arcadia, thank you very much. And
Ruined the salt water.
the salt water ruined all the farming on Longboat Key. Oh boy. 1926, Longboat Pass Bridge was built by the county. It was floated away in 1932, and the remains of it were taken to Palmetto, of all places, where it became the bridge became a landmark in Palmetto. It was in Palmetto, yeah. And it was replaced in 1958 with the bridge that stayed. It was replaced in 58 with the present bridge. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel started in 26. Longboat and the hotel were cut off from the city of Sarasota in return for Ringling Bridge and lower taxes. They wanted lower taxes, so the city of Sarasota said, okay, fine, we'll cut you off from the city. And Ringling said, that's fine, you can have the bridge now and lower the taxes. And that's how they did. New Pass Bridge was built in 27. In Okeechobee in 1928, a hurricane over there killed 2,000 migrant workers. The migrant workers were over there picking the crops, and the hurricane hit, and they fled. Only the hurricane went north, and then all of a sudden the storm surge came south and killed 2,000 migrants.
I think a levee broke or something like that.
Levee broke, or whatever it was.
Something.
And the Longboat Bridge washed away in 32, told to Palmetto, I mentioned. 1935, the Whitneys arrived, and they built some cottages. They looked all over Florida to find a nice place, and they found it. And they bought some property and built some cottages. And business wasn't very good because the cottages were $50 a week, and that was pretty high. But they survived and did pretty well. 1936 to 1943, we had a school with 17 students. We had a rough time getting it, but they hired a gal who had 5 children, and so that increased the number. So they got permission from Manatee County to have a school. 1939, dredging of beer can of the bay. The beer can starts eroding. Who owns it? Who owns it? Conrad versus the state. We're talking about Beer Can Island. Who owns it? Well, it turns out that they went all the way to the state, and Conrad, forget his name. Frank Conrad owned the land, and he didn't want to build anything on it. He didn't want to establish who owned the darn place. Who owned Beer Can Island? And it went to the state, and finally the state came down with a ruling. Yes, Mr. Conrad, you own it. But a Manatee County Commissioner said, no, he doesn't own it at all, we own it. Oh, really? Finally, Conrad said, oh, to heck with it. So it was then awarded to Manatee County, who owns it still. In 1941, there was a bridge scam. That was during the war. Some people decided that they were going to have they needed a bridge across Longboat Pass. They needed a bridge, needed it like the hucksters in, what was that movie?
Never mind.
Doesn't matter. Well, we got to have a bridge. We got to build it today. Yes, sir. We're going to have a party. We're going to have a cookout, and we're going to have.
It was a big party.
Oh, it was a big party. It was so big, in fact, it was advertised. These people behind it were scam artists. They really were. They had jitterbug contest, barbecue, high wire, and believe it or not, this was in 41.
We'll end on the highway.
I think they had like a couple of thousand people or something.
No, 17,000 people.
Holy,
this, believe it or not.
We haven't had anything like that since.
Well, I know it. Hell, we haven't had 17,000 people on Longboat Key.
Right.
And the newspapers, in the Sarasota paper, covered it very well. And in one place they said yes, and it took about 3 days to get the cars out from the sand. Because in those days they had narrow rims.
Yeah, I guess. It got all stuck.
It was something. And this was a time also in 41 where the shark factory, the Dad Holbrook.
Well, you didn't finish about the scam artists.
Oh yeah, the scam artists. Well, they had all those things, and people attended, and it was a great success.
People bought
And they
bonds.
they bought stock in the new bridge that was going to be built, and everything was just fine. And the next day, the people were gone with all the money. So it was never built, and nobody will ever admit to having bought stock in that street, believe it or not. I've asked so many people that were around, and I suspect Gordon Whitney bought stock in it, but he never admitted it.
Well, Mother and Daddy sold the property where the bridge is now.
Is that right?
That was, what do you call it, like where the government takes your property and they say,
yeah.
we'll give you
Eminent-
so much money. Yeah.
Eminent domain.
Yeah, and it was a big argument. You know, Mother and Daddy said they didn't get enough money for it. But
Right. Did they ever get it?
Yeah, they got money, but not
Not enough.
what the
Not
real
nearly
value
that.
of the land was.
So that was the end of Longboat Pass Bridge. And as a matter of fact, the foundations are still in view. One of them has been covered up within the last 2 years, but the other one is right near shore
Grecian.
on the south side.
Same place it's been all these years.
That's right.
Hasn't changed much.
Oh, that's marvelous. Well, let's go on. Oh, I'm talking about Dad Holbrook, the great shark. Dad Holbrook lived around here, right in the north end, someplace, and he was a very well-educated guy from Maine who came down here and decided, in retirement, I'm going to have some fun. I think I'll take some sharks. They got a couple of sharks and he said, hey, there's a market for these things. They're fins and all sorts of stuff.
The liver oil.
Yeah, the liver and the oil and the fins. And so he went into business. And he was catching sharks. I think he said got 3,000 over 6 feet. But one of them was a dilly. It was a great white shark. It was about 20 feet long, and no one will ever admit where they caught the shark except the guy who caught it, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Edgar Green.
Edgar Green, yeah. He worked for Dad Holbrook. He caught one, and he said later, all the newspapers, of course, and Gordon Whitney said, yeah, that shark was caught about 5 miles off Longboat Key. Edgar Green didn't say a word because it would ruin the tourist industry. So what he did was he told people quietly a few years later, actually I caught this thing less than a mile offshore.
Well, I think it's about a half a mile, quarter
Half a
mile
mile
offshore,
offshore.
off Whitney Beach.
Yes, right off Whitney Beach. And if he'd said so, there would go,
Well,
there would go Whitney Beach.
I had the fortune of meeting Edgar Green with Kent Chetland.
Right.
And they were right outside of my screen porch, and Mother and a friend and I were having coffee, and we said, recognize Kent. And we said, hey, Kent, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm establishing where that picture was taken of the great white shark. So I
Right.
got a chance to meet Edgar Green and to talk to Kent. And we said, well, where was it brought up? And he said, right where you're sitting. So right where my porch was
Right.
where they brought the shark up. And when you look at the picture, you can almost look across the bayou and recognize
Right.
that it was right there. And Edgar Green said at that time that the shark was 24 feet long. And I said,
That's
well,
a big fish.
I said, how did you know how long it was? He said, well, we didn't have a tape measure because we just didn't do that. But he said, I had a poling oar 18 feet. And Edgar was a big man. I mean, he was at least 6 feet tall.
Right.
And he said, I laid the poling oar down next to the shark, and I laid down next to the poling oar, and he said that was the length of the shark, and
Wow.
he said 18 feet plus 6 feet would be 24 feet. So I guess there's all kinds of ways of determining
And all
Sounds
kinds
like
things,
more
but
unique.
somebody, a personal witness, a first-hand
Right.
witness would be pretty credible.
Absolutely. And let's face it, the story about it has multiplied, I'm sure. So
But that was from the horse's mouth. That was the man
you
who
can't
caught
get
the
any more
shark.
accurate than that.
Yeah, well, it'll
Right.
be up for conjecture for years.
Well, let's see what happened. Well, we finished with the bridge scam, in which 17,000. Actually, the Saratoga newspaper has that in print. 17,000.
It's hard to imagine that.
Indeed. Then came World War II, and the Germans had submarines all over the place. They had them out of the Gulf, and we had quite a few scares. The Air Force had a target range right on Longboat Key. They would come from Sarasota, drop their bombs, or fire their guns and go out over the Gulf. And at least 3 airplanes were lost in the Gulf from this bombing.
And there's holes all back in the bay.
Oh yeah,
John Morrill, my professor at New College, told me, he says, you know where those holes are, how those holes formed? And I said, no, I never really thought about it, but how did they form? He says, when they drop bombs.
yeah.
So
Where are these holes?
Off of Sister Key.
Really?
Yeah, there's just all these holes where they drop bombs, and
Sure.
then it gets deeper than seagrass grows.
Sure.
And so the seagrass never has reestablished there because it's like, 6 feet deep, and
Right.
the seagrass doesn't grow below 4 feet.
Right.
Oh, they don't.
And so as a result, Longboat Key has quite a history of involvement in World War II. But we also had the Coast Guard here. They took over one of the motels.
The Albion Inn.
Yeah. Well, no, this was on Longboat Key.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about
And
Cortez.
they had there's a movie incidentally called Sunday Dinner with a Soldier. It was John Hodiak, and I forget the other gal. It was made on Longboat Key, believe it or not.
Well, that would be fun to get that movie and show it.
We've got it. You've got it. Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen it.
Haven't? Oh, it's marvelous. It's in the collection. Anyway, it's all about a guy who's on a furlough, and he walks around, and finally he comes to Longboat Key, and a family there invites him in, and because
And he and the girl fall in love.
All right.
oh yes, it's a cute little movie,
Cool.
and they used the
We had
the
a
bus.
devil of a time getting it because those old movies aren't kept even.
They're not
Yeah.
cataloged. We had
Well,
a
I'd
long-
love to see it. I just haven't seen it in our
Good,
collection.
I'll look for it. And what was it? Well, anyway, that's World War II. Oh, the Coast Guard used to take. They had a motel on Longboat Key they stayed at. They drove people out, and the Coast Guard took over with dogs, and they walked the beach every night.
Right.
Yeah, north and south.
And they used to have a thing where they, advertised that the public needed to be on guard and
Oh, yes.
watch and keep their lights out.
Right, and
No lights, and
One
then
night,
watch the
one
water.
night,
Laura Whitney.
Laura Whitney told us that she got a call from Tampa saying, "Would you please watch out for the beach tonight between about 4 hours or so?" Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. So she walks out on the beach, and sure enough, she sees a light. And she didn't know what to do, so she didn't do anything. And the light went out, and nothing happened. So she reported out to the Coast Guard. Yeah, that's right, good. I'm glad, that's fine. That's the submarine that was going to land there. I'm
Wow.
glad wow. So that's how close we came to having personal knowledge of World War II. Then in 1950, we had some of the problems on Longboat Key began to appear. We had no DDT. We're not supposed to use it. We had raccoons, we had rats, we had mosquitoes, we had roaches, and we had peacocks.
So it's the same.
Same as today.
Not the mosquitoes. You don't have mosquitoes like
We
they
still
do.
have
Oh, yeah.
mosquitoes,
Nothing
but not
like-
like that.
nothing
But
like
we
what-
still have them.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
And
And gnats.
the restaurant that used
Sand
the
gnats.
restaurant that's now what's her name? The big restaurant, the expensive restaurant.
Mar Vista?
No.
You're talking about the peppermint stick?
No.
The,
No. Anyway,
Euphemia Hay?
Low Bears.
or Euphemia Hay.
Euphemia
You're
Hay.
talking about
Right.
Euphemia
And
Hay.
Euphemia Hay is a very popular restaurant today, but it used to be known as Jory's Restaurant. And at Jory's Restaurant, the proprietors put some clothesline in the backyard and put some food out, and before you know it, they had a raccoon circus out there.
Well, they would put the leftover food out
Yeah.
for the coons, and then that was the entertainment.
It sure was. So, as a matter of fact, it was so good that people would come from miles around to watch the raccoons and to eat the food, which is good. The only trouble was, after a couple of seasons, one of the raccoons had rabies, and that ended the raccoon problem.
Well, before that, they had Guy Pascal, who
Oh.
was the first mayor, had said that they had estimated that he had 150 raccoons at his house, and Mother said that they would go for parties, and they would have drinks and have dinner, and after dinner they would put the plates outside,
Right.
and then they would have after dinner drinks and watch the raccoons eat the food off the plates.
Oh boy.
So that was, and then the first police chief had what they called the raccoon circus in his backyard.
Well, really?
And he had a show where he had a number of raccoons. So this has been going on
For years.
for years.
Absolutely.
And,
And even today, except there's so many rules now that there are a lot fewer raccoons today than there were. But
well, they still have a lot of raccoons on the island.
Oh, yes.
They just don't have any management policies
That's
for
true.
them that are.
But talking about Guy Pascal, he was the guy who started the town of Longboat Key. He invented Airwick, and he was a chemist.
Now, what is Airwick?
Airwick is something you put
Like an air freshener?
air freshener,
So you plug it in,
or
and it gives off.
Wow.
He was a chemist.
Wow.
but it was very popular and really sold back in the 50s.
Oh, yes.
And didn't he have a talk show, like a radio,
He
a
did on-
controversial
He
radio
did on
talk
the radio
show?
station in Sarasota.
Uh-huh.
And when he came out here, he decided that we ought to have a town. And there was great consternation because a lot of people didn't want a town. If you have a town, you have taxes, and they also have restrictions. Well, he engineered it, and at the final vote, which was held, I think, at the Mar Vista, the proponents of it got up and spoke, and the opponents, one of them was a guy who was an amateur boxer.
Was that Roy Ruiz?
No, I forgot it. It's in my
Flanagan, wasn't it?
Flanagan, yeah, it's in our book,
Right?
which is called From Calusas to Condominiums.
Yeah,
It's
you
a
can
history.
show the book if you
Oh,
pick
yeah.
it up and.
Yeah.
The Historical
Here's
Society has
This is a book
copies.
on the history of Longboat Key, and everything we talk about here is in this book.
Yeah, and Ralph and Claire worked on that book, and then we published it at the Historical
Yeah.
Society a couple of years ago, and
Republished.
republished it, and we have we got 750 copies, so we have
deal.
plenty of copies, and they sell well, and
Oh, that's-
we certainly appreciate what you did to help us.
Well, Claire and I wrote the book starting in '95 when we sold the Observer.
And it is
We worked on it for about 7 years.
it is the definitive book on Longboat Key right
Well,
now.
I guess so. It's-
That and Laura Whitney's
Yeah.
book are the two best books that we have.
Absolutely. Well, let's go on now.
How
If-
much longer do you
If you want to take a break, we can stop any time, and then you can just pick up. Do
No.
you want to get a drink of water, or?
You want anything? I don't. I'm
Okay,
fine.
well then let's
Fine.
just go on.
We'll
In
just go.
1952, there was an argument over Longboat Pass. Manatee County had decided we don't want a bridge there, we want a causeway. And the fishermen on Longboat Key said, no, we don't want a causeway on
And
Longboat Pass."
Cortez.
And Cortez, we didn't want a causeway, we want a bridge. Oh, no. So they finally had a big meeting, and it was, the idea of a causeway was defeated.
Well, back then the boats. I've talked to the fishermen about it, and they said the boats only went 5 miles an hour. So if you were going to go fish in the pass, and you had to go all the way around the north end of Anna Maria Island, you would make what would normally be a 1 hour trip into a
5 hours.
all-day trip.
Yeah.
You know, back and forth. That would be several, hours.
Right. In 1952, the Art Center was started at the present location. And there have been attempts to move it, but never happened. So the Art Center is now there. It's in combination now with the Ringling.
It's combined with.
Yeah.
Ring.
And it's very popular. In 1954, there was a political situation there where a guy who was running for commissioner in Sarasota County decided he needed the Negro vote. So he was going to have a Negro beach on Longboat Key. And
Because they didn't have.
they didn't have, these were the days of segregation, early 50s. And Longboat Key didn't necessarily want a private beach for blacks. And as a matter of fact, the blacks just wanted equality. They didn't want a private beach. And so, strangely enough, the whole thing died, and there was never a black beach on
Well,
Longboat
somebody
Key.
said, I could say Kent Chetland, but I don't really remember who it was. But he said that may have been posturing to get the people of Longboat Key to form a town.
It's
That
possible.
they actually had a picnic out here,
Oh yeah.
and that he thought that could have been part of the.
Very likely could have been.
But I don't remember. I can't quote somebody that I
Right.
don't really remember. But I remember hearing that, and I thought, well, that was interesting.
That is true, because just at this time, they decided that if Sarasota was going to zone, if they were to go to control our zoning, we better have our own people do the zoning. So they started that, and
That's when the town was formed.
the town was formed.
And they
then.
had fist fights over it.
Oh,
and,
they had everything.
and Guy Pascal, they used to drink a lot back in those days. And Guy Pascal one time came here to a party, and he told everyone that he was not going to go anywhere that weekend unless he walked on his hands. So apparently he was pretty physically fit to
He
be
was
able to
indeed.
walk on his hands.
Right.
And Mother's the one who told me the story, and she just, was fun to think of the old days of them
Right.
having nothing better to do than sit around and have drinks and watch the raccoons eat the food,
And watch
and
the
then
guy
have
walk
Guy
on his hands,
Pascal
huh?
walk on his hands everywhere.
Oh God, that's marvelous.
But he was in one of the fist fights, I think. I think
Oh,
that
yes.
was.
Yeah, he was, and
What was
he
the
was in
story
a fight
about
with Flanagan.
Yeah.
And Flanagan was in his cups and wanted to fight. And Guy Pascal said, "Look, when you're sober, I'll be glad to fight you. You know how to fight you now, and I'm a semi-professional boxer." He said, "Well, that's fine, but just get lost, because I don't want to fight a drunk."
Well, did you ever hear anything about Roy Ruiz? Roy Ruiz
How do you spell it?
Ruis. He built the apartments where I live now, and I just was interested if there was
No.
any information. He was supposedly a retired boxer.
Really? Oh boy.
Never heard.
Well, they had the fights at Mar Vista.
Paper
Charles
down.
Flanagan was there. They fought with tire irons and golf clubs.
This is covering your face.
Oh, I'm sorry. The final vote was 98-3 to create it.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. You don't get that kind of vote on anything.
And when that happened, Guy, Pascal, and Melody wanted a fire engine because they wanted to raise funds because they had a big fire, the 1954. Pardon me, the Buccaneer fire, and the Buccaneer, a lot of the cabins just burned down. They called the fire department in Sarasota, and they said, "Yeah, we'll come out as a guaranteed payment." So Melody said, "Yeah, okay, I'll pay you." So 26 minutes later, the fire engines got here. By that time, it was pretty well gone. 2 men had passed out. General Harris opened the bar when it was finally under control. And they said, "Melody, will you please pour the drinks?" "Yeah, sure," said Melody. So she poured the drinks all right. She
Yeah,
poured
that's
8
it.
ounces of straight bourbon in each glass and handed it out to the people. Well, boy, they were sure. Yeah,
Anesthetized.
they sure were. Well, the town was founded in 55, and 57, Longboat Pass South opened over here. It was closed in 63.
That's not south, that's north.
I know.
Or maybe you're talking about the Beer Can Island pass.
Beer Can Island, yeah. It was closed.
It was like
opened
during
in-
Hurricane Donna or something
Yeah.
like that.
And then they opened it up again, then it was closed again by another storm. And finally they dredged it to what it is now, which is not where it was. Where it was is about 200 yards south of where it is today.
Yeah, well, the pass has just changed an incredible amount.
We had a shark attack in 1958 off Trailer Park. A boy was swimming and he lost an arm to a shark. They never said anything about it. But
Yeah, they dragged him up on the beach and
Yes,
they
they
had to
did.
beat the shark off of him or something. It was pretty
oh, boy.
gruesome.
The bridge over Longboat Pass is finished. This
Did
one-
you know they had a shark attack off of New College? There was a student swimming at night. They were
Oh,
drinking,
yes.
and
I
they were
did
having a
that song.
party, and the shark
In the
grabbed
bay?
a young woman by the body, her thoracic cavity, put his teeth around her body, and then spit her out because it wasn't what he wanted.
Did
But-
she recover?
Oh yeah, she looks great. She has the greatest teeth imprint on her body. Perfect jaw, like you could see the teeth everywhere.
Isn't that
And
awful?
it just grabbed her and then decided this
When was
wasn't
this?
the one. About 10 years ago.
No, I don't remember.
And I met the girl and I saw the wounds and I went, wow. I said, that is amazing.
Yeah, somebody ought to do a story on that.
Yeah. But it was New College tried to keep it quiet.
Oh, boy.
Bet.
In 1959, Arvida buys the Ringling properties. He bought 2,000 acres on Longboat Key for $13 million, which in those days was quite a,
Arthur Vining
yeah.
Davis.
And in 1960, Pelican Harbor was discovered to be an abortion mill. They had a dock where the boats could unload the gals who needed abortions, and it was a whole abortion clinic.
Wow.
They did a marvelous job, and it was finally closed up. They discovered it. In the art center, they had a gay 90s review, marvelous. They wanted to. We have a town now. Town hall was proposed to be on some islands, right off of this. Right
The
off.
town island.
Yeah, town islands, and everything was fine. It was approved by the state and rejected by the commissioners.
Well, probably the cost of doing that would have been huge.
I don't know, but in any case, and then they voted
This
on,
down so they can see your face.
should the commissioners vote by districts? I mean, should you elect your own commissioner by your own district? And that was disapproved, 166 to 161. It was that close, and it came up again when the north end, when the south end wanted to secede. They had another vote, same thing. The Southerners wanted to secede from Longboat Key.
Because all the business and all was on the north end then. And the
Well, there
south-
weren't that many people. I tell people, 1960, when I was like, 9 years old, there were only less than 1,000 people on the whole island. So you're talking about if most of the people were at the north end, that wasn't very many people.
Yeah. When the Ritz-Carlton was leveled in 1963, 3 kids had been killed in the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz-Carlton are falling down the elevator shaft.
When they would play hide and seek and they'd go
No,
there
there's
to
a
drink and do games.
Fraternity initiations.
Yeah, but it was just.
Oh, yeah. That was a shame. Oh yes, the Cross Bay Bridge. That's still up in the air. They wanted to build a bridge from Longboat Key to the mainland, and that was proposed in 1969, then in 73, then in 78, then in 80, and then in 81. And in each case, it was debated and then tabled. So they put it on the shelf. A couple of years later, it would come up again.
Well, to give you an idea, this bridge was built in '58, and in 1990s, like 1995, they came and said, "We are here to replace your bridge. Your bridge is a certain amount of time old, and
Yeah.
automatically, after 30 years or whatever, we look at replacing bridges."
Right.
So anyway, this bridge was supposed to be replaced in the 90s, and the
Still there.
town said they weren't interested in replacing it, that they would put that off till later, and so now this bridge is,
Well, wasn't
58 to now, that's over 50 years old.
Now, did the town reject it?
Yeah, the town rejected it, and there
Sounds
was,
like the town.
What?
Sounds like
It sounds like the town, yeah.
but they wanted to build a big bridge, like,
High-rise, huh?
when they have money and everything's going in that direction, now they have no money.
Oh boy.
But they wanted to build a 60-foot bridge or 65-foot bridge that would have no draw.
Yeah.
Because that's the tendency,
Sure.
like the bridge over to Sarasota, so that they don't have to stop and start and keep the bridge tender.
In 1971, the town installed town water and sewage. That was fine. Except on one street, Jungle Queen Way, some of the people said, "We don't want town water." "Well, you gotta have it." "Well, why do we? We own the road." And they said, "Oh yeah, that's right, you do." "Well, you still gotta have it." They said, if we gotta have it, town, you pay us." "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, we own the road, we won't give you permission." So the town said, "All right, we'll pay you." So the town paid some residents of Longboat Key, of Jungle Green Way, for the right to put the water and sewage lines in.
Yeah, and everybody was at the time was forced to do it. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody had well water, was pretty resigned to drinking well water, and had septic
Yeah.
tanks already they paid
Right.
for.
Oh boy.
Did you tell about Jungle Queen already?
Yeah.
Oh,
Why? What do you want to say?
Nothing.
No, that was, we were on Jungle Creek Way, and Claire and I hired a lawyer and asked people to contribute to the legal fees, which they did, but 3 people said no, and we went ahead with it. And the reason it took so long was the town commission was mad at the Longboat Observer, and we lived on Jungle Creek Way, and so they put a thorn in, they put a monkey wrench in the works for a couple of years. Oh, do it yourself, do it yourself. Finally, the town decided, hey, it's a town road, we'll do it. So that's what happened.
They paid.
In '74, transfer of density came along. Transfer of density was, what's his name? Anyway, a guy, the rec center was proposed, and
Yeah.
yeah, oh God, I won't go into that. That's so detailed, but it was turned down, of course, by our town commissioners. And the transfer of density, I think it was Ansel.
Jerry Ansel.
Jerry Ansel was a very well-to-do film producer, and he owned a hunk of land there, a big hunk of land, and he said, "I'll tell you what, it's on the Gulf side. If you'll let me build,
Higher on the.
if you'll let me build this density, and let's say it's 100 units on the land that I own, I'll transfer some of it to the Gulf, and I'll give this land to the town.
That
So-
way I can build my condo
Then I
higher.
can build my condo
Right.
out." Of course, the town turned that one down. And then a few years later, it came along again. And I think Ansel gave the, I don't know, anyway, the town spent quite a few $1 million when they could have had it free. But that's all, yeah. In '76, we had a bicentennial parade, Broadway to Town Hall. That was quite a party. In '78, the Longboat Observer started with 4 pages, and that was the time when the town took off. All these big high rises.
Now, you were the originator of the Longboat Key Observer. That
Yes,
was the
yeah.
first
Yeah.
paper that was
The
named
Longboat.
the Observer.
Right.
The Longboat Observer.
Longboat
That was
Observer.
his-
Observer. Yeah, we sure did. '78, and we went through the first year with no employees. We had 4 pages. We were mighty proud of the 4 pages. We tried to find advertisers.
And before that, they had the Gulf Gale or something,
Oh,
a
yeah,
little, and then the
Whitney
Longboat
boys had
Key
some.
Notes.
It's all the history of newspapers is in this book too.
Uh-huh.
And I forget what they had the Whitney boys put out a mimeograph sheet.
And we have a copy of the first
Yeah.
one that
Oh.
was donated by Ray Whitney.
Yeah, yeah. Oh boy. Oh, and that's just, we're talking about the Observer started in '78, and the New Pass Bridge straight across approved by Longboat Key, but defeated by the county. I forget why. In 1980, the town's 25th anniversary of Publix opened. Boy. And then we had another transfer density fight in '81. And that was so vitriolic, and the Observer came out in favor of a transfer of density, and 2 or 3 commissioners really hated the Observer. They even boycotted the Observer. They had Publix pull all the papers out because they didn't like the Observer. They didn't want to distribute it in Publix, believe it or not. So we finally got back in. In 1982, the water pipe under Longboat Pass broke.
Well, don't forget, in 1980, you formed the Longboat Key Historical Society.
Oh yes, 1980 was the historical.
You and my mother and
Right.
other people
Right.
and Patty Cobb and
Right.
Walter Mays. And
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in 1980. Oh, boy.
we used to meet right in this house, right
Right
at
where
this
we're
table,
sitting.
right?
My. So the water pipe under Longboat Pass broke, and the town used fire hoses to cross the bridge to supply water to the inhabitants of Longboat Key, because we had no connection with Sarasota County. And people scratch their head and say, hey, maybe we ought to have a connection with Sarasota County. So about 20 years later, they did.
Well, now they have a really substantial, if you look up there, you can see how well that pipe is secured to the bridge, and
Yeah, oh,
they
yeah.
have stainless steel hangers,
Sure.
so that must have influenced them when they
What they did
redid-
was they had a great big pipe from Manatee County over the bridge. It's still there, and you can see it as you pass under the bridge. That's
Right.
that's
All
our
that
water
blue-
supply.
That blue.
Oh. And the funny thing about it, when they were discovering the water leak under the bridge, Longboat Key sent down divers to see where it was and everything else. And the divers had to fight off manatees who went down there for the fresh water.
Yeah, and the
It was spilling
manatees and sharks. I've had divers who said that they were under the Cortez Bridge and they've never seen so many sharks in their whole life. And they've been diving all over the world. They said
Oh,
they
my
just,
God.
but it must have been just
Oh,
a
my.
rare coincidence.
And that was the time when St. Jude's Luncheon started by Herb Lovett. And in '83, the New Pass Bridge was stuck open. It was stuck open for almost a week. Claire and I were on vacation, fortunately, and to get across New Pass to go to Sarasota, you had to use a ferry boat.
Our daughter was left in charge.
Our daughter was left in charge, and sure enough, they used ferry boats. They rented everything they could to get people to cross, and I think for 2 or 3 days, they had no contact with Sarasota County.
Well, it's funny living on an island. Kent Chetland said when he first came down here that they had the opening of the Cortez Bridge.
Right.
And that they had ringling circus, you know, people,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
not many people realized that in the old days that there were a lot of circus people that were connected
Sure.
to the circus and baseball players.
Oh, yes.
So those were two of the
Baseball players used to come up to the North End restaurant
and drink over there at
and
Melly's.
drink and eat
The
fried chicken.
broken reef.
Broken Reef, yeah. We have a picture of their fire there. Where's the deli? And then we had the Red Tide boat. In '83, there was in '78, Red Tide was pretty bad. One year it was so bad, that Sid Oakes, our commissioner, contacted Pat Neal, who was then in the legislature, and said, look, we got to do something about Red Tide. I just came back from Switzerland. They had a boat over there that picked up debris in Lake Louise or something.
Right.
And he says, we could use something like that here, couldn't we? Pat says, yeah, let's see. So sure enough, they got one.
Well, sometimes during red tide, the fish will be blown up in these bayous, and
Yeah.
they'll be like 2-3 feet thick,
Yeah.
and just solid
was,
fish
yeah.
that are
That
rotting and
smells,
stink.
yeah.
Right.
So they built this boat, and they had a tryout in, I forget where, in Manatee County, someplace, and it worked fine. It was great.
So we have about 5 minutes left. I mean, I'm just telling
Okay.
you for your benefit. You can just talk and go at your normal
And
rate, but I just
they
thought I'd
tried
tell
the boat out, and it worked fine. So they put it into service. Only the captain said, no, I'm sorry, I won't, this is dangerous. It's not seaworthy. Like, they're not seaworthy. So they put it out of service, and they sent it to North, and they never used it. Oh, what a waste of
Well, we haven't had a bad red tide in a while. That's lucky,
Yeah.
because it's not a good thing.
And then we had the Charter House, the restaurant on the south end. The same bunch of people were against it. Kit Bernald, Harry Kurst, Han DeShield, Carlton Stewart all voted no. The court reversed the verdict and also reversed the appeal, and so the Charter House was built. No one volunteered to run St. Jude's in '86, so Murph Clowers said, okay, I'll run it. I'll call it the Gathering Place. So he did, and it was a very successful one, and he gave all the money to charities,
Local charities.
to local charities. 1987, bicentennial of the Constitution Parade, In 1988, the town paid $2.7 million for land it could have had under transfer density. Isn't that nice? Clover was awarded over $8 million from the town on where the town sued him, and he sued back and went to court in Manatee, no, in Tampa, and he won, and he settled for $6 million in cash.
Well, he made that concession because he said that he wanted to give the people of Longboat Key a break. That he
Certainly.
won. And
Certainly.
he didn't want to.
Oh boy. In 1989, Beach for Nourishment was voted on.
Okay, your time's about up.
It was defeated, and it defeated again in, oh boy. But they diddled around with it with a 80-20 plan, and it was passed by 15 votes. That's how close we've had to not having beach-free nourishment.
Well, it was a controversial issue, and now it's just sort of become just
absolutely.
precedent. They do it here,
Absolutely.
and it's huge amount of money now. You're talking about
Durant-
$40 million, that they talk about now.
Durant Park was started. Jim Durant's wife, deceased wife, Joan, wanted a little theater. But these commissioners wanted passive recreation. So instead of a little theater, Joan gets a botanical garden.
Yeah.
1996, a cultural community center on Durant Park was defeated. Similar result in 1998. PIC was against it. The Public Interest Committee was against it then. I think they've changed their mind. In 9/11, George Bush was at the colony, and the next day, you know what happened.
Well, I had Murph Clover as a speaker. You were at that event. That was very nice, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I introduced him. I said, the man who has been on the front page of the Observer more times than anyone else.
Well, anyway, Claire and I were at the colony that night before, and we met a lot of the Secret Service men. It was fascinating.
And we met George Bush.
And we met George Bush that night, but the whole thing was fascinating. It was quite a...
Yeah, and there was probably more to that than we'll ever know.
Oh, yeah.
Because somebody said that they turned away a van full of people who looked like they were from the Middle East.
Right?
I had someone the next couple of days later that drove up that looked like someone right out of the terrorist
Really?
thing, driving a red
Really?
Mercedes, brand new red Mercedes convertible, wanted to rent a place here. And he asked me, in broken English, if he could rent a place here. And I told him, I said, you have to go to Michael Saunders and Company and ask, I said, you go to a real estate company and ask. But it was when they were saying that there were more plots to blow up the Skyway Bridge and people should be on alert. So I called the Longboat Police and they came and treated me like I was some sort of a nut.
Sure.
And I said, he said, what, did you get the license plate? And I said, a red, shiny, brand new convertible with two people who look like terrorists in it.
Right.
What more do you need?
And
He's just going, oh yeah, buddy, sure. Well, look, thank you. Let's just.
Our last item is in 2011. Some refugees, Cuban refugees, landed on the north end of Longboat Key, right here.
Right. And you know what? If they would have given the guys blowers and rakes, they probably would have gotten away with it. You know what I mean?
Gotten away with what?
Earphones. If they would have taken all the Cuban refugees and just give them blowers and rakes, nobody would have even noticed them.
That's true.
Well, okay. Well, Ralph and Claire, thank you very much, and we'll try to do more of this in the future. And this is just another effort to kind of preserve the history of Longboat Key.
I got to mention the fact that a local guy interpreted for our police department when the Cubans landed. A guy named Ortiz, who has a landscaping business.
Right.
And
The thing's quitting, Ralph.
this is a far cry from 1955, when 93 people